Yes, Madam Speaker, unfortunately the Conservatives never had that sort of a principle when they were actually in government. Madam Speaker, if we talk about disinformation, and I'll use this as an example, the Speaker that spoke before him made reference to me using Japan with respect to deficits. And what I had indicated is that you have G7 countries, Japan, United States, the United Kingdom, France, and I cited the G7 countries. And I said that Canada's GDP or deficit to GDP ratio, and I reflected also on the overall debt, we're doing outstanding. We're number one and number two in both categories, number one in one category, number two in another category. Then if you reflect on Stephen Harper, when his leader sat around the Conservative caucus, if you look at real dollars, the deficit then was higher than what it is today. So I'm wondering if the member would not recognize that this false argument that the Conservatives are putting forward to justify their desire for an election is just that. Just one of many things in which they continuously mislead Canadians on.
Honourable member for North Island, Powell River.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for giving me the opportunity to point out something that I think needs to be raised in this House, and that is how bad the fiscal situation has deteriorated in this country. Now, the truth is, and I believe my honourable colleague will know this, that Canada's federation is structured differently than other countries in the G7. We hold massive amounts of what's called sub-sovereign debt in our provinces, and historically speaking, the federal government has backstopped those provinces if necessary. So when you combine with looking at total government debt, according to the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, Canada is the 7th most indebted country in the entire world. We are right up there with Italy, we are right up there with France, and we are right up there with the United States, which of course, though, is the world's reserve currency, so has a slightly different set of circumstances to deal with. So what I would say is that if this government truly thinks that sub-sovereign debt shouldn't matter in that calculation like all of the international metrics does, then it should get up and declare publicly that it is not willing to support or back any provincial governments that may run into problem down the road. Barring that, we need to start looking at total government debt in this.
No other questions? Questions et commentaires?
Questions and comments, Honourable Member for Joliette-Manawa. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank my colleague for his speech and the eloquent response he just provided. I'd like to get back to the issue of the deficit announced in the budget, $70 billion this year. The government says yes, but there's a lot of investment in there, so they don't calculate it like they did before. And when we look at the details, there's the PBO who said that the definition given by the government to investment for capital investments is too broad, and he proposes that that subjective definition be reviewed by independent experts. With that method, the Trudeau government's deficits were lower. What does the honourable colleague think of this?
Alan Powell River.
I thank my honourable colleague for his question. He raises a very good point, which is the fact that what this government is trying to do, and we've seen it happen in corporate Canada before, is move money around into different pots and that and try to mask the headline figure, the top figure, which is the massive amount of new debt. What matters is that this government is planning to borrow $321 billion over the next 5 years and put that money on the back of future generations to pay for. By moving money around, whether it's you put it into crown corporations, whether you call it investment, it doesn't matter. When you are a creditor who is lending money, you don't care if the money was spent was borrowed to buy submarines that are going to last 50 years or to pay school teachers today. Debt is debt. It all carries interest. It all comes with interest and all affects the carrying capacity of our country. So I think what we need to do is we need to cut through the spin, look at the bottom line of how much this government is borrowing and how that compares to previous generations. As I pointed out, they've more than doubled our national debt, and it's time to get back to fiscal sanity and fiscal responsibility in this country.